we've been doing swing games. So we did the SEC, both divisions. We did the ACC. Tonight, Big Ten swing games. By swing game, to remind you of what our definition is, it's not always your biggest game, but it's the game that's going to be the most pivotal in determining how your season goes. Let's start with Ohio State. They play at Indiana in Week 8. A lot of focus on the quarterback position for Ohio State, but a lot of focus for people who really, really follow the program on a day-to-day basis is on defense. Mine too. I'm looking at defense. I got all the confidence in the world. Quarterback's going to be really good for him. C.J. Stroud, I don't have any questions about him, and we've never even seen him start a game before. It's defense where you have the question. And so you look up and down their schedule, and you ask yourself, well, where will we get the answers to those questions? It could be at Indiana in Week 8. It could be that you have to wait that long. Ohio State's off a bye. You will certainly have their full focus because of what almost happened in this game last year. And this is where a potential championship team should start to hit its stride. It's not Week 2 or Week 3. You're not ironing out the wrinkles in your team anymore. This is time. This is time to hit your stretch run. So I'm going to go at Indiana for Ohio State in Week 8. What about Penn State? Several options here. We could go with the Wisconsin game to open the year. They got Auburn in there in Week 3. They got Indiana a couple of weeks later. Man, you look at the schedule, those are 3 very tight conference games before the bye, and at Iowa's the last one. They go to Iowa, wild swing here, and what could be the outcomes before we get to this game. But even independent of what happens, I don't think Penn State's going to lose all of their losable games before this. This could be where the season turns. They could head into that bye 2-4. They could head into it 6-0. All those outcomes are going to be on the table. This trip to Iowa, though, it's a loaded week for college football. Week 6 is a loaded week, and this trip to Iowa going to be a big one for Penn State. For Iowa, it's the same game. I'm picking the Penn State at Iowa game as the swing game for both of these programs. Iowa's got Indiana and at Iowa State. Those are the first 2 games of the year. Then they're going to be off your radar for a while. And then they're going to reemerge. This is their big home statement opportunity. This is, again, in Week 6. It's the only time I think that they'll be an underdog aside from the Wisconsin game for the rest of the year. So by this point, obviously, we think we will know what we have with Iowa. I mean, certainly, if you look at the scheduling for all the world, this will be a must-win sort of do-or-die mode, maybe for both programs when it comes to chasing a spot in Indianapolis in the Big Ten title game. How about Michigan? I picked the Indiana game. Indiana at Michigan. It's in Week 10. There are a lot of choices here, too. Gave strong consideration to that Washington game in Week 2, only because Michigan's one of those teams that really needs a fast start. And they're going to be one of those teams that's doubted, and you don't know what you have at quarterback. And so there's going to be a big referendum in Week 2 when Washington comes in there. I think a lot of people, when they saw that hypothetical point spread, and they saw Washington is probably going to open as a small favorite, they said, are you serious right now? A Pac-12 team, not even the favorite out there, is coming in here. They're going to be favored in the big house. It's just Fred Sanford. It hurts a little bit. It should. I think that's a big game. That's not the one I'm circling. I'm circling the Indiana game. I had a hiccup. I think pounding my chest gave me a hiccup there. It's a totally different offense. This is why I'm picking the Indiana game. All these other offenses Michigan will have faced to this point, they kind of come from the same mold to varying degrees. This Indiana team, totally different, though. And this Indiana game is sandwiched in the worst possible place. It's sandwiched between a road trip to Michigan State and a road trip to Penn State. And you got Indiana thrown right there in the middle. We ran the numbers on this. I would project this as a pick'em point spread right now. Very competitive game, and not the most opportune spot to put it on the schedule. How about Wisconsin? Speaking of Michigan, I picked the Michigan game as Wisconsin's biggest swing game in Week 5. It's that end of the very tough kind of opening month or 5 weeks for Wisconsin. We've talked about this stretch. Now, they're all home games, but they got Penn State to open, they got Notre Dame coming in there, and they got Michigan. They should be favored in every one of those games. Well, the Notre Dame game is a neutral site game, so there's not a true road game inside any of those. But it's going to let us know where they stand. I mean, not just this one game against Michigan, but this is the final game in that stretch. And we will certainly know. I'm one, for instance, who believes that Wisconsin's offense is going to pleasantly surprise some people. Well, if it does through this stretch of games, you look out for them. They could be a bowling ball through the rest of their schedule. And finally, Indiana at Penn State, week 5. Very easy game to pick for me. It'll be a game of the year type situation for Indiana. I know they got Ohio State later on down the road, but this is one you talk about bright red Sharpie circling this thing. You remember how this ended last year, how we looked at the box score and it seemed impossible. Penn State could have lost, but the scoreboard said otherwise. It's the second tough road spot for Indiana. Do you end up going in there and making them outscore you in their own house? I'm talking about Penn State. Do you go into Penn State and end up making them outscore you? Because that's kind of what it turned into last year at Indiana. I wonder if they can turn that same thing in Happy Valley. Those are our Big Ten swing games for this year.